Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, where today, in a Tier 7 battle on the Mannheim line map, we're featuring, I'm going to pronounce his name Jimmy Jazz, just because that's cool. I mean, it could be Jimmy Jazz, I don't know, maybe it's Spanish, but Jimmy Jazz it is. And he is in the Tier 7 Super Hellcat. This is a machine that people just traditionally don't really seem to do well in. And there are a couple of pretty good reasons for that, which we'll go into in a moment. But generally speaking, whenever I'm watching a World of Tanks battle and there are any Super Hellcats involved, they just don't seem to do very well. They're either the first one's dead, which is a common feature amongst Hellcat drivers, even at Tier 6 in the non-Super Hellcat, or if they're not dead within the first 2 or 3 minutes, then they just very rarely seem to have achieved anything worthwhile and hardly end up doing anything like a respectable amount of damage or earning much experience by the end of the battle. And there are a couple of fairly solid reasons that may explain this, although the first reason that I'm going to give is just pure speculation, because the Super Hellcat was a gift tank. It was awarded in 2019 to anybody who had 5 years or more service on their World of Tanks account. So it's possible that the generally dismal performance of Super Hellcat players was down to the possibility that since it was a gift tank, maybe a whole bunch of people found themselves playing a machine like the Super Hellcat for the first time. Maybe they'd never played the Hell... No, I'm just reaching for straws here, aren't I? Look, I'm trying to be positive here and offer excuses. But if anybody who in 2019 had been playing World of Tanks for 5 years and still didn't know how to play a lightly armoured fast tank destroyer, that's on them. Plus, it was 2019, that was 3 years ago since this thing was introduced into the game, so if they still suck at playing the Super Hellcat, again, that's on them. But they may suck at playing the Super Hellcat for a couple of very good reasons. Mostly encapsulated in this one simple statement. It's just not very good. What are you talking about, Jingles? The Super Hellcat is basically the Tier 6 Hellcat with the M36 Jackson turret and 90mm gun, and the mobility restored to its pre-nerf levels of awesomeness. Well, yeah, I mean that's technically correct, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. For those of you who don't understand what I'm talking about by M16... Now, for those of you who don't understand exactly what I'm talking about when we say that the Super Hellcat has the pre-nerf mobility of the old Tier 6 Hellcat, we really do have to go back a couple of years, way before 2019 when the Super Hellcat was introduced. Back to when Wargaming decided they were going to introduce an entire line of turreted American tank destroyers into World of Tanks, beginning at Tier 6 with the M18 Hellcat. The Tier 6 M18, when it first arrived, was fairly overpowered. I don't think anybody would disagree. It wasn't so much the firepower. It had access, and still does have access, to a great 90mm gun with decent penetration, good alpha damage, and a reasonable rate of fire. It was the mobility and the view range. A combination of view range that would put an equivalent tier light tank to shame, as well as a top speed of 72 km per hour that would put an equivalent tier light tank to shame, and light tank mobility that basically rendered light tanks in the same battle as Hellcats completely redundant. In fact, the American Tier 7 medium tank, the T-20, would often get outfought by these things in close range combat. So a nerf of some kind was inevitable. And what Wargaming did was they let it keep the 72 km per hour top speed, they let it keep the 90mm gun, but they severely nerfed the mobility and the turret traverse. So it was no longer possible to circle strafe medium tanks a tier or two higher than you and win in the Tier 6 M18 Hellcat. Overnight this led to countless deaths of M18 Hellcat players who thought they were still the best light tank in the game. They weren't. But what you have here in the Super Hellcat is exactly that. The M18 Hellcat before that mobility nerf. So why are you saying it's a bad machine, Jingles? Well, a couple of reasons. First and foremost, something that you may have already noticed thanks to all of the bouncers, god-awful penetration on this 90mm gun. And I'm not just talking god-awful penetration on this 90mm gun because it's the same gun but at Tier 7 rather than Tier 6, so it has to fight tanks with heavier armour. It's actually worse. even if this was a Tier 6 Hellcat, it's a Tier 6 Hellcat with a worse gun than the Tier 6 Hellcat. Admittedly, if you're firing standard armor-piercing ammunition, it does get, I think, 7mm better penetration, but it's a full tier higher, and that in no way compensates for the tier shift. The problem is the premium ammunition, which on the M18 Hellcat at tier 6 and the M36 Jackson at tier 6, with this gun gets 243mm of penetration. But on the Super Hellcat at tier 7, it only gets 210. All of which means that if you're like Jimmy Jazz here in the one tier higher Super Hellcat, if you're not taking a significant amount of gold ammunition into battle, you're probably going to struggle to penetrate anything heavily armoured like KV-3s, for example. And if you're unlucky enough to find yourself in a tier 9 battle, you're going to penetrate nothing with your standard ammo, and you're going to struggle to penetrate anything even with the gold. It's almost as if Wargaming are trying to sneak in another vehicle that's basically designed to sell gold ammunition. Like the Chrysler GF. Does anybody remember that one? The Tier 8 Premium American Heavy that was basically designed to sell gold ammo and precipitated the whole Fochgate incident. A tank that had frontal armour that was so strong that you basically needed to load the gold in order to damage it, but itself had a gun that was so bad it needed to load the gold to damage anything. Oh, the Centurion's given up the cap. That's very brave of him. I can almost imagine the strokey beard session they must have had at Wargaming headquarters when they were having the discussion that led to the introduction of the Super Hellcat. They'll have been stroking their beards and smoking their pipes and saying, oh, gold ammo sales aren't very good. We should try something like that Chrysler Grand Final thing again, except this time without leading to the worst PR disaster World of Tanks has ever had. Hang on a second, how about instead of selling everybody a premium tank that necessitates the use of gold ammo, we just give everybody a premium tank that necessitates the sale of gold ammo? Oh, hang on a second, I think you might have something there. Yeah, let's give them a tier 6 tank destroyer, except we'll put it at tier 7 and we'll nerf the penetration of its gold ammo. So they have to take a basically full gold ammo loadout in order to do anything. By Jove, sir, you're a genius. And thus the Super Hellcat was born. On the plus side, at least, the Super Hellcat is, because it's had its mobility restored to pre-M18 Hellcat nerf conditions, it is still able to do things like this. Even though the T-29 is thinking and has loaded the high explosive, there is no way an M18 would be able to pull off a close combat maneuver like this, even though the T-29 did manage to get a second shot off and has reduced him to the grand total of 10 hit points, technically 9 more than he actually needs. In that circumstance, an M18 Hellcat at tier 6 would have just died, because it wouldn't have had the mobility or the turret traverse to be able to pull off that kind of maneuver. It used to be able to do that, which is why it got nerfed. The Super Hellcat can still make that work. Just barely. I mean, 10 hit points. But the T-29 was only able to get the second shot off that reduced him to 10 hit points because the shot from the front with the gold ammo bounced. Admittedly, that was probably more because he was using auto-aim. Oh, the KV-3's finally got side shots. He can finally penetrate the KV-3. And of course, the KV-3's view range is so bad, he can't even see who's shooting at him. Poor old KV-3 got himself caught in the open at the worst possible moment. He'd advanced too far forward to be able to safely reverse back into cover. I mean, he tried, but then he realised this is not going to happen. And he wasn't far forward enough to be able to get into cover in the other direction. So yeah, all he could really do there was die. And Jimmy Jazz has now expended his entire stock of gold ammo. All he has left is the 160mm penetration standard ammo. And he's facing an AMX AC-46 that he's probably not going to be able to beat from the front. And an AT-15A that he's definitely not going to be able to beat from the front. Which means he has to cross all of this open ground to come to the aid of that Barask. Fortunately, he's in a pre-mobility nerf Super Hellcat, so crossing all of this open ground is not going to be a problem. Equally fortunately, that Barask has been doing an amazing job of not actually dying and occupying the attention of the AMX-46 and the AT-15A. Because the only way Jimmy Jazz is going to hurt these guys is from the side and rear. So he needs to keep that Barask alive, if at all possible. Because with only 10 hit points and a basic inability to do any damage to those two tank destroyers, if they turn to face him, he needs the Barask to keep occupying the attention of those two enemy tanks. And that is exactly what he's doing. He's at least keeping the attention of the AT-15A, but the 46 turned around to see who was shooting at him, and frankly, I'm amazed that shot penetrated. I was not expecting that to happen, but hey, I guess, you know, even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. The Barask is probably still reloading, but he's still keeping the attention of the AT-15A. Jimmy Jazz sneaking over the rocks here, and he's got the side, and he's got the kill. Managed to do it without flipping the tank over on the tank traps as well, which would have been very embarrassing and would almost certainly have led to a defeat. But hey, he didn't, so it wasn't. So, Jimmy Jazz in the Super Hellcat, another vehicle specifically designed to sell gold ammunition, although I am very happy to report that, presumably as a veteran of the Super Hellcat, Jimmy Jazz has worked out precisely how much ammunition he needs to carry in order to be effective in this machine, and yet somehow still be capable of turning a profit. Because despite the fact that he entered this battle with 18 rounds of gold and only 12 rounds of regular ammunition, with a premium account, he's still managed to turn a profit of, well, whatever. A profit's a profit. At least he didn't end up having to pay for the privilege. So, well done, Jimmy Jazz. Thank you for sending that one in. Everyone else, I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.